Hi, Thathsarani. Hello.
Hi, Akhila. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining me. So as I was telling everyone here, we're thinking of talking about the marginalized sector of society that we have, through our research, discovered um, to be the women and their participation in the labor force. The technical term for this is female labor force participation. And so before I start off, we'd like to just let you guys know that if there are any questions or any opinions that you'd like to discuss, we are more than willing to facilitate it and help answer those questions to the best of our ability. So I'm joined by Thathsarani, a fellow research associate at Advocata. Thathsarani, is there anything that you do want to add on before we start?
And so basically, since we are talking about the Labor Day without labor reforms, I think we are on the right track in terms of talking about gender discriminated labor laws. So if you all have any questions, just make sure that you drop by in our comment section. So whatever we can answer, we'll try our best to answer all of them. Yeah.
Okay, so before we start discuss anything regarding Sri Lankan labor reform, particularly, I thought it would be prudent to have a little bit of context as to why Labor Day and the International Workers' Day is celebrated. To give it a bit of context in history, I think in 1984 or 1884 was when the 8 by 8 by 8 work hour schedule was implemented by unions of the working force, which is to say that it's 8 hours for work, 8 hours for recreation, and 8 hours for rest. So now when we look at Sri Lanka, I don't know about you guys, but growing up, we were always, at least I was always told that, May Day is something that is exclusively for union workers, and therefore it's something that, that should not be celebrated. But growing up, as you grow old and you do your reading, I think it's prudent to understand that at some point in time that we all fall under the working class, which is to say that we are workers to some extent at some point in our lives, right? So now when we look at females in Sri Lanka, at least the way that I've seen it, and the research that we've done, is that there are a couple of laws that are meant to protect women that lead to the alienation of them from the workforce. But this has nothing to do with labor force participation. But I think as some time ago, a lot of people were aware of a law in Sri Lanka that currently exists, that prohibits women from purchasing alcohol. So we do have a history and a lot of archaic, legal regimes like that. So Thathsarani, would you like to narrow down our conversation so we don't go talking about everything?
Yes. So I think in terms of labor laws, I think in Sri Lanka, specifically about laws relating to women, basically gender, they come from a very protectionist kind of a mentality, right? For example, if you take nighttime work, so normally according to Sri Lanka's labor statutes, a woman is not able to work after 8 p.m. So obviously there are some exceptions, like in the restaurants, the tourism sector, you can work until 10 p.m. But mainly all other sectors, women can't kind of work after 8 p.m. So this is kind of coming from a more of a like a protectionist kind of a mentality and kind of like a patriarchal mentality as well. But
Right.
also we're talking about very, very old laws, which still we haven't kind of reformed. We haven't kind of made the changes that kind of make it applicable for the current context, to the current economic context, right? So nighttime work is something like that. Even part-time, the overtime work and also part-time work, nighttime work, which are like the most, the currently most used kind of working platforms, I would say, because of COVID-19, a lot of people went to work from home, right?
Right.
So part-time work, flexible time work was like something like initiated, like brought out into the labor market basically with the COVID-19, right? While for foreign countries, you all have laws to like kind of say that we have part-time work, we have flexible time work. In Sri Lanka, both for men and women, right? So this is the kind of laws that we are kind of looking at. Anything to add, Akhila?
Yeah, so just to add to that, I think what you said was right. You know, we have a lot of laws that are archaic and old and ancient. So for example, I think one of the couple of them, the Shops and Office Employees Act, is dated at 1954. The Wages Board Ordinance is 1941, and the Factories Ordinance is dated to 1942. So, I mean, to put it into context, not most, but 2 out of 3 of these are, you know, pre-independence, which is to say that a lot of things have changed in status quo, right? And you know what, people can say that, you know, in the private sector, people do, like women do work past these legal barriers that exist. But I think the problem that a lot of people fail to understand is that if something goes wrong, that there is no legal remedies that are available to women, that, you know, the protection that you so spoke of really does not exist. And I guess also, I think we need to understand that certain sectors are not more prone, but have more involvement for women, right? So if you look at things like nursing, if you look at things like supermarket work, you know, stuff like that have more women involved, and those industries by nature have requirements that exceed the usual 9 to 5, right? So supermarket post and pre-pandemic, I think they will run till like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and some places are 24 hours. Nursing, of course, I mean, it's a 24-hour thing, right? That the clock really doesn't stop us for something like that. But yeah, and I think another thing that we need to identify is, you know, why people or women especially go towards part-time work, and why that recognition is important is that I guess the dual responsibility of being a home caretaker and fulfilling that duty, that societal duty and responsibility put upon women, forces them or limits their ability to engage in full-time work, right?
Yeah. Just to add one point to what something that you mentioned earlier, that you said in terms of because there are these the existing of these laws, like something like nighttime work is not existing in Sri Lanka, especially for women. If something happened, there's no laws to protect it, right? So since like this is the labor, the gender discriminated labor laws, especially something that is widely discussed. In one of the discussion points, a lot of people mentioned was, so even if you go to restaurants, right, you don't see women after 10 p.m. because that is the limit that women have, right? With the 2 hours, you need someone else to do run that schedule, run that shift, basically, right? So, and like there was this foreigner, and he was asking me like, why do like we don't see women after 10 p.m. who's running the restaurant, right? And I was like, he was like, what is the reason for it? And then from our KII, what we have found out was because since they can only work until 10 p.m., so if something happened after that particular hour, there are no laws to like protect women and also the employer, basically,
Right.
because it's illegal for the employer to recruit women to work after 10 p.m., right? So it's kind of, it's discriminatory from a gendered perspective, and also kind of you're kind of removing women's choice to stay in the labor force and to do whatever that she or he likes. Right. And at the same time, from the employer's end, it is kind of a loss for him as well, because if you just say, if you are an employer running a restaurant, you recruit a woman who's very capable of doing that job, right? But that woman can only work up until 10 p.m. So how does the person, like the employer, and the rest of the 2 hours with another person, right? You have to get another person to do the rest of the 2 hours, right? So that is something I was like, okay, this is something you need to change. And the problem is, like, we are talking about all these labor laws, and it has been talked about for like the past couple of 10 decades, right? So basically the 10 years, but nothing has changed, right? I think when Advocata first launched our policy brief about this gender discriminated labor laws, it was last year, January, there was a gazette which came out during September or October, which says the cabinet has knocked their head to approve women to work in the night, right? But the official gazette is still not out, right? So people are talking about it, but the problem is they're talking about it, but there's no action for the talk, right? Like most of our policies, there is no action, right?
Um, yeah, so I mean, no, what you said makes sense, and at the same time, it's a zero-sum game because not only does it affect the worker, it affects the employer as well. Because I mean,
Sure.
what incentive do they have to employ women if it comes with so much, for lack of better term, baggage, right? Because
Yes.
they have to provide, if I'm not mistaken, that it's mandatory, or at least through administrative leave. I think certain industries, they provide transport to women and stuff like that, and those are just added burdens when employing a woman, and that is understandably disincentivizing employers from taking them on, and that leads to discrimination
Yeah,
in the broad of the word. Like,
for sure.
I mean, literally they're not discriminating, but anyone can understand.
Yes.
So I just pulled up a really interesting statistic here, Thathsarani, and it says that according to the labor force survey of 2021, 59% of women cited engagement in household work as a reason for not participating in the labor force, while only 3.6 men, cited household work as a reason for not participating in work of any form. So, this is something that I also heard a lot when we were launching the Women's Policy Action Network. A lot of questions came up with, how do we change societal narratives about care work? Is it legally possible to start pushing for house husbands, or maybe incentivize that somehow? And I think that's something that needs to be discussed, because the disproportionate amount of work that women put in are also disincentivizing themselves from taking part in the labor force in any legal, meaningful way. And I say legal and meaningful way because, that, what is it? I think it was about 40,000 women workers left to the Middle East, low-skilled labor. That leads to them being, because there's lack of communication, lack of information, that there leads to a lot of abuse for these women, and at the end of the day, as a state, if you're not, and in society, if you're not able to protect your own, that just doesn't make sense. So, yeah, about care work, is there something you'd like to add?
Yes.
Or let's talk about it.
So once the 2 points actually. So one, you mentioned about the one of the reasons why women don't go into the labor force is because of the unpaid care work. So basically, because we still have this like patriarchal mindset of like, women should do all the household work, women should take care of the children. Like we don't think that it's like kind of like it's not up to women to do it, right?
Yeah.
If they do it, it's by their choice. But it's not necessary, not a necessity for women to do it. It's like both men and women should do it, right? So why does women only have to do household work, and if the income level that they get for the family is not enough, she also have to do a job, right? So basically, you do the job, you do household work, you take care of the children, and if you have an elderly parent at the house, you have to take care of them as well, right? So totally the care burden is majority borne by women, right? So in terms of that, yes, it is very, very important where these labor laws come in terms of like legalizing basically part-time work and flexible time work, because for some women it's their choice to stay at home and be a mother and take care of the children and do the household work. That is totally acceptable. That's their choice, right? At the same time, for a woman, their choice might also be to engage in the labor force, right? So because I think this is something that we all know in Sri Lanka. The statistics shows that in terms of educational attainment, women are they attain more higher education rather than men, right? So this is something like an untapped skill labor that we have in Sri Lanka, right? Because only 30% of women are in the labor force. While we are in economic crisis, since we are also in a very kind of a reform mindset to kind of reform this country into a better kind of future, I think it's very, very important, like we tap into this potential, right? So we can't tap into that potential without addressing all these problems. You have labor law barriers. At the same time, the main main factor that influence the main factor that women doesn't come into workforce is care work, right? So you need to address that for sure. There's no debate about it, right? And the second point you mentioned about a lot of women leaving the country to migrate into the eastern area to do I think the basically for the Middle Eastern areas, right?
Yeah.
One thing is women go because they don't have enough economic opportunities in Sri Lanka, right? If they have plenty, if they have enough opportunities in Sri Lanka and they get enough money for the effort that they put in and for the efficiency that they put in, they won't leave, right? So imagine like you're leaving a country, like leaving your kids, leaving your husband into another country just to earn money, right? So I think that is where the government should come in and kind of facilitate that platform into bringing more job opportunities. I think for you to bring out job opportunities, also have to think about the economic growth in the country.
Yeah.
If the economy don't grow, there won't be any job opportunities, right? I think that is something that should be also focused on, because I think almost all of us, like right now, that we are thinking, okay, the IMF has come in, the process is going on, but we don't think about what's going to happen next, right? Yes, the IMF stabilization came in, but at the same time, along with that, you need the economic growth for the country to move forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
so that is,
I mean, definitely I do agree with most of what you said. But just to let the audience know that if you guys have any questions, that we are more than willing to answer them. You guys can take part in the conversation. This is not just a two-way thing that you guys are just listening into. We are more than willing to have direct communications with you guys as well. So Thathsarani, I think talking about care work and the migration part. Now, something that I read upon a lot, or not a lot, but that was at its inception, I think 2017, was a family background report. And speaking of gender discriminating labor laws, a bit of a mouthful that is. The family background report specifically is something that alienates women from opportunities overseas, right? So that is to say, if I have to give everyone a breakdown here today, the family background report is something that women above a certain age, when migrating or going abroad for opportunities or occupational opportunities, they have to fill out this document that says if they have children, how old the children are, and if the children have sufficient caretakers, and in certain cases, if the children are below a threshold age, I think it's either 5 or 4 years, that the woman then is directly not allowed to engage in any work that is foreign. There's a lot of stuff like that prevent women and from going abroad for work. And a big conversation that was part of society, I think during the economic crisis, was that there are a lot of foreign remittances that are not coming in. But surely, I mean, if we are not allowing a big part of our workforce or a big part of our unfortunate export, that individuals that go abroad and send money back, but we are making it so much harder for them,
I think just to add to one of the points that you just mentioned, right? So before joining this session, I was listening to what Dr. Ramani Gunathalika was saying about the whole family background report, right? So we are like, you can't leave the country if you have a kid because you want to protect the women and the children in the country, but also you expect them to, whoever goes abroad, because the country is going through its own crisis, you are kind of depending on the remittances that they also kind of give us, send us, basically, right? This is kind of very hypocritical in a sense where you can't leave because, especially if you are a woman, you can't leave because of the family background report. And second of all, and on the other hand, we are kind of looking at the remittances that we get, because we are kind of shortage, not right now, but earlier when there was shortages in dollars, right? If the family background, like if it's all about taking care of a child, why does the mother, like not just the mother, right? That limitation, if there is a limitation, it should come for the father as well. So why does that discrimination?
Right.
Yes.
I was just about to bring that up, is to say that burden of bringing up the home and maintaining of the family shouldn't solely rest on the shoulders of the mother. I think we as society, as things have evolved, like we have understood that gender roles, to a certain extent, even in Sri Lankan society, historically, they have been, I wouldn't say non-existent, but the glass ceiling is slowly being shattered. And when we have laws like this, I think it's a bit understandable why societal norms are the way they are. And to bring out something you spoke about, it's relevant to care work and the discrimination. I think maternal and paternal care in Sri Lanka, at least, to my understanding, is something that is quite gendered, which is to say that I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 6 weeks, right, for the mother?
12 weeks. For mother, it's 12 weeks.
Right, 12 weeks.
Yes, paid 12 weeks and 3 days for the father for government and semi-government sectors, but not for the private sector.
Right. Yes.
So in terms of so in terms of go ahead.
So sorry, not to cut you off, but I think it's good that you brought out the difference between private and government sector, because I think the private sector, if I'm not mistaken, John Keel's Holdings had put out a very, I would say, a landmark precedent in the way that they're teaching childcare, which is to say, if I'm not mistaken, it's 100 days paid.
Parental leave.
Maternal leave, both, right?
Both.
Right. So I mean,
it's both,
if corporates can understand and identify the productivity that in certain cases where you give your employees, and the worker, that's we're speaking of. Perhaps it's time the state also recognizes that these minute things, because in the grand scheme of just amending a couple of words is not going to take as much time as perhaps trying to legalize, I don't know, or something hairbrained that governments are legalizing the sale of marijuana or something like that. These abstract, catchphrases that make the headlines aren't really things that are going to be pushing us forward. But if you look at the small things, perhaps allowing or recognizing part-time work would be a big step, and that wouldn't take much. It would be something small, saying that part-time workers and full-time workers are two separate legal entities, and therefore the EPF, ETF, the off days, legal stuff like that would be different, and therefore, incentivize employers to get involved as well.
I also think because there is this part-time work is not also recognized, because this recognition doesn't come in the law. Employers also tend to not hire part-time workers as well. So there's a discrimination there as well, right? And also the things that you mentioned about the paternal and maternal leave. I think I read in a report where it said in 2018, this is the cost for the according to the calculation that they have done, providing maternal leave for 12 weeks paid maternal leave, it only will be 1.2 billion.
Right.
Which is lesser than providing fertilizer subsidies and samurdhi. Right. So we are talking about such a small number, but it's a huge big deal when it comes to implementing these policies, right? When corporates like John Keel's take such initiatives, and I think that's one of the key milestones as a country that we have kind of achieved, right? I mean, if the corporate sector can do it, why can't the government sector can bring in a law and say, I mean, let's say, no, don't give us 100 days, at least start from 2 weeks. Something is like some start is also good, right? We have to start from somewhere. I think that is where the government, also the policymakers, should kind of prioritize in terms of the labor market as well, because we are, like, in terms of Sri Lanka's labor laws, first issue is we have an aging population. Second of all, our skilled labor is migrating, right? So we are going to have a problem in the future in terms of our labor, right? So before we face this problem, we need to get our laws straight, and we need to make sure that we also tap this untapped potential skilled labor which is out there, just because there are restrictions that prevents them coming into the labor force, right? Handing over to you.
Yeah. So just to like ground what we're saying, you know, now to show to you guys that we aren't just pulling these sentiments out of thin air. If you look at international examples like Austria, Belgium, Germany, European countries for the most part, recognizing part-time work and legislating it led to an increase of about 27-26% of women's employment rate, you know. So if those things can happen in other countries, and that's something that, you know, we're so good at doing as a state, is look at other states and say, you know, why you know, there are positives that can come from yearning to be like countries and other nations. So I think we have run out of everything and anything that time, yes, that too, and everything that can be discussed under this. They're going to the nitty-gritty of, you know, the exact articles of the legislation and like how they should be amended and the there. I think we have covered up everything so far.
Just a small reminder as well, because as Advocata, we kind of speak a lot about these gender discriminatory labor laws, right? So we kind of put out this initiative called Women's First Action Network, where we bring in all these stakeholders to kind of be like asking to like make a single voice to make these reform recommendations. So for whoever's watching this discussion, just make sure that you also follow our social media pages in Women's First Action Network for you to get a more idea about all the issues that we are talking about in terms of labor. Yes.
Yeah, so sorry, I completely blanked out on that one. But thank you so much, Thathsarani, for joining me and having this discussion, which I think was a bit productive, at least for me, because I feel like I learned a bit of here and there about things that I wasn't too familiar with. I hope that the audience was also able to understand a lot, and I feel, and hopefully we can start a conversation about like this, because you know that's where the ball starts rolling. Is you have conversations like this, and then leads into change. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Thathsarani, and I hope you guys have a long weekend ahead of you.
Yes.
See you.
See you.